Happy International Women's Day. So thank you everyone for joining Women in Art and Tech in celebration of International Women's Day. I'm Erin-Atlanta Argun, your host and the commissioning editor of MyArtBroker's Edition magazine. This year's theme for International Women's Day is Inspire Inclusion, and today we'll be exploring the innovations and insights of women who are pioneering the intersection of art and technology. According to a report by UNESCO, less than 30% of the world's researchers are women. Yet, in the fields of art and tech, women are leading some of the most groundbreaking disruptions to the traditional art market. I'm joined by four of these pioneers today. First, we have Kerstin Gold, an art and tech strategy consultant for the arts ecosystem and an advisor to art tech startups. Kristen is co-founder and author to the Art and Tech Report, an independent research initiative examining the intersection of art and technology. Also joining us is Bernadine Brocker-Wieder, CEO of Arcual, an organisation providing digital infrastructure for the art industry. Bernadine co-organised the first Christie's Art and Tech Summit in 2018 and has facilitated blockchain proof of concepts with Everledger since 2016. We're also thrilled to have Kristen Yraola, a digital-first marketer with over 20 years of experience in leading omnichannel marketing strategies and championing digital transformation. Kristen has a remarkable track record at some of the world's leading art and beauty companies, including Sotheby's, Christie's, L'Oreal, Omnicom, and Shiseido. Lastly, we have Charlotte Stewart, Managing Director of MyArtBroker. Charlotte has spent 16 years in the secondary art market, starting her career at Christie's before leaving to consult a number of online secondary market platforms, always with a view to disrupt the traditional structures which prevent access and control for collectors. Today in this panel, we'll be exploring the experiences of these trailblazers who are really reshaping the traditional art world with tech. We'll also be discussing what the future holds for art and tech and for women working within this exciting landscape. Throughout the panel, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be going through them towards the end of the panel. So let's kick off by discussing moments in your career which catalyzed your interest in art and tech. And Bernadine, can we start with you?
Sure. Exactly. I've been in the art industry, but then there was kind of like a spark that started the interest in technology. And I was managing an art gallery at the time that used ArtNet and ArtPrice and all of the inventory systems and sales systems that existed back then, which was in 2010. And while using those technologies at the time, cloud computing was still very new, and it was that was innovative at the time. People were scared about the cloud. The potential for connecting with others internationally and increasing accessibility to the art industry through technology was really inspiring. And it led me to set up a company that connected museums and collectors for exhibitions through the internet. And I think that as I've continued in my career, I've noticed that the changes caused by technology in the art industry are immense, because it's not only changing the way that we communicate with each other or find each other, but it's changing the content of the art itself and the way that we own and experience it. And that means that we're going to have to rethink everything that was written in the 19th century, trying to categorize what art is and what it isn't and how it works. So I find it extremely exciting.
Amazing. Kerstin, what about you?
I have to say I've been a strategist all my career, but I had a change in path because prior to my art market experience, I've been working as a strategist in a corporate and creative agency context. So when you offer yourself as a consultant in strategy, it's really, really important that you always keep track of what's happening around us and in our world, and that includes technology innovation as well. So it's always been due to my job to understand what's happening, but it's It's been 12 years ago when I shifted and positioned myself exactly in the art market as a consultant for art market players, to realize that there's a lot of negativity, skepticism, maybe even anxiety when it comes to technology and also change. So I felt there is room for me as an ambassador and evangelista to actually mediate that technology can contribute and add something good to it rather than just being a threat. And accompanying my clients in trusting the future and finding their very own way to understand how everything which is happening around us is relevant for them and what kind of technological innovations are not. It's really rewarding to see you can help clients to guide through what's happening. And so technology to me is less of a skill, but more of a mindset, I'd say.
And Charlotte, I suppose that's very true for you as well with your experience at Christie's. So how did your experience there and maybe frustrations with people not embracing technology, how has that inspired you at MyArtBroker?
Well, I think Kristen and I, who were involved in auction at the same time, I started in 2008, and you were really looked on as a tech business if you had a website in some regards. People would say, "Oh, I'm in art and tech," and you say, "Oh, great. What does that mean?" Well, you can browse the artwork online on our website. And that's not very long ago. We're talking 15 years ago, and I think we're in the most incredible. I think we'll look back at this time and go, "Oh my God, look how much was changing." In the way that we already do. And I'm talking about how art's being made. I'm talking about how art's being sold. We're on a very much a new frontier of how the art market's going to look and who's going to be buying it in 40 years' time.
Mm. And Kristen, with your experience at places like Shiseido and L'Oreal, how did that change your approach to leveraging technology into the art world?
Well, there were a lot of things that I learned, for sure. And I'll be very candid. When I went into Christie's back in 2014, it was a shock to me that a recruiter would even call someone from a company like L'Oreal, as big as it was, as awesome as it is. But I primarily thought it was interesting because Christie's, like what Charlotte said, was going through its own digital transformation. And I recalled what happened when I first joined L'Oreal in 2001, and I've been in this digital space since 1999. So having seen things go through over and over and over again, one part that I felt was like that resonated with me was going through a digital transformation in a large established company felt like being an incubator or a startup, but you had the stability of this organization. And I would say like that to me was like the impetus to be like, I want to try this again for something different. And I think as we all know here, being in the art industry has its own set of challenges, its own set of interesting quirks, etc. But there were many things that Christie's had wanted from what I had learned for doing digital marketing for so long that at the time I just didn't think, what would a ultra high net worth consumer want with all the things that we were doing? And sure enough, yes. Do you search for art on Google? You do. Do you use social media for art? You do. All these things that already had seemed quite basic to me were all the things that back in the mid 2000s or teens of 2000s were just coming into its own, both for art and also for luxury. I think back then they thought that the internet was almost too democratic for a space like art or for a space like luxury. Now that's completely unheard of.
Mm. And I suppose you've touched on this a bit already, as in our frustrations with people not wanting to harness tech in this quite antiquated market. But in your career path, what other challenges have you faced? Maybe Bernadine, with regards to what Arcual do, what have been the main challenges there?
Absolutely. I think that behavioral change and changing the way that you do business, you need to really see a reward at the other side to understand why you're going to change how you do things. And with Arcual, we're building is a system whereby we can create immutable records of ownership and transfer that to new owners in the future. and assign smart contracts that include things like resale royalties or additional documentation for the artwork, installation guidelines, things like that then can go from owner to owner. It sounds great, and it's like an archivist's dream to have a clean database that has all the information in there. It's also the thing that so many have tried and failed to do. And I think that the reason that it is difficult is information is power, number one. So people are protective of their information. And secondly, because of the fact that you need to have that kind of reward at the end of it. Like, why do I want to do this? What's the gain? And with Arcual, we initially started very much inspired by the NFT industry with the resale royalties gain, saying we can help artists earn on future sales from their ongoing sales by programming it into smart contracts. And we've seen with NFT marketplaces how royalties are not being upheld. We also see how with things like artist resale right, that those types of contracts are not necessarily always enforceable, or rather you have to get them into law and as a right for artists to get it enforceable. So I think that it's still something that is core to a lot of to the belief system of a lot of artists and a lot of collectors. So I do think it's going to stay, but I think that what we learned was that it needs to be optional, that you need to be able to choose if you want to have a percentage go back or not. And also that it's a discussion between the collector and the artist in the gallery that they can have on their own terms, and that you don't have to impose it from above. So I guess the big learning from like a very zoomed out point of view is that everything needs to be customizable and optional, because there are so many different use cases in this system, which is always a difficult thing to hear when you're trying to build technology that follows a logic. So speaking of the difficulty of the art industry and building technology for the art industry, I think that's probably one of them, is how hard it is to create formulas that you can replicate for a business that has a lot of unique properties.
I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. When you talk about unique challenges, the art market is one of variables. And the problem with building technology for it is that you have to be able to take into consideration those variables. And then back to all your points, is that these large institutions, auction houses, mega galleries, they're not very easy to move. It's like picking up a juggernaut. I mean, Kristen, I remember you walking into Christie's, and I remember you coming in with ideas. And I remember being quite mind blown, because we've been doing things in a certain way for a long time. Picking up a infrastructure that has been around for 250 years, which is what the auction market is. I mean, we're still selling things at auction like you sell cattle in the Middle Ages. That's the business plan, by the way. That's the plan that we still pay into. It's a very, very difficult task to go, right, guys, this is how we're going to do it now, because we're going to be able to reach the next generation. We're going to be able to create access and transparency for people. I feel like that's the challenge across all our areas, having had separate conversations. It's a big challenge.
But I think if you start with little wins first, I think that's how I kind of turned it at Christie's, because I think that the challenges that I faced at Christie's was not the actual job of doing digital marketing. Is it exactly what you all are saying, which is changing the mindset? Because here I was asking, hey, can I move resources to do digital marketing this way instead of putting it in a printed catalog? Find those folks, those colleagues who are willing to do tests, experiments. Usually they tend to be the smaller departments, showcase that win. And then the bigger departments, the one with more money, bigger artworks, they're going to be more likely to be like, oh, I should be taking part of this too, because look, it's working there. And again, I think there's still like this cloak of secrecy around what we sell in the auction houses that sometimes I think can be, concerning for some folks about like where the art goes. I still get this sometimes, like, where are my ads going that feature this artwork, et cetera. There's a lot of controls that we have now in place for that. But I agree wholeheartedly with what everyone is saying, which is you have to start with your little wins, showcase that, and then you get the bigger wins too. And I remember, Bernadine, when you presented in the first Art and Tech at Christie's, and I said, that's where it's going. My goodness, the provenance needs to be someplace where it's easy to track. So, and I truly believe that it has gotten further along since then, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I would like to add, I'm working a lot with art tech startups, primarily pre-seed, so very young, very in the beginning, and trying to launch either an MVP, which is not really finalized yet, or trying to get help in terms of how to enter the market. And it's really interesting because normally, especially when it's about technological innovation and being first in something on a technological basis, they tend to they would love to enter the market by saying, this is what we invented, and this is, a first time of something, and it's not what the art market will be buying. So that there needs to be a translation, even if it's a unique innovation, which says this is what this will be solving or bringing you or gifting you or, helping you to do your job. So it's really interesting that you have to wrap everything, which is technology driven, to be digested from the art market side to actually realize this makes sense or might, enlighten your work or contribute to your sustainability and your future of the company. So yeah, it always needs wrapping, I guess, and to avoid the pure technological magic because it's not appreciated, because sometimes it's not even understood, but there can be a different way to deliver those solutions to the market, I guess.
Yeah, I think we've there she is. Always, we love tech, but there are always issues with it.
No, it's classic, isn't it? Classic. I completely agree with you, and what you're saying about not coming in with it tech first. When you're presenting it to whether that be industry insiders who are looking, like they're looking to understand the opportunity. How can they add value? Whether you're a product, whether you're building a platform, it's really tempting, isn't it, to start with the technology, but actually you need to start with what it does and what it creates and what it has and what the impact can be, because that's really what we're all trying to do in some way or another, is create an impact that it hasn't been possible before. But yeah, absolutely, I've had that same experience.
And Charlotte, so obviously we've already spoken about this, but technology is playing such a transformative role in the art market now. What role do you see it playing in the future?
What role do I not see it playing in the future? When we need to sort of break up the art market a little bit when we answer that question. For the purposes of, we've obviously touched on auction houses quite heavily. Bernadine's talking about the incredible ability to create a digital dossier but we've talked between us about how there's a challenge there with secondary market. It's fantastic if you can get it at the beginning, because then you're good to go. But trying to pick up years and years of history and hold it somewhere digitally, you've got to trust that information to start with. So it's a much bigger issue. Where I see it going in the future, when it comes to the blue chip art market, you have to remember that the way people are buying and selling at the moment, most of that generation that makes up the top of the triangle, as I tend to call it in the art market, they're boomers, and boomers are going to not be with us in 40 years time. Aging millennials are going to be on their way out. How are Gen Zs buying? How are the next generation buying? Because I tell you, they're not buying at auction. They're not buying by necessarily walking into the glitz and glamour intimidating gallery on the high street. They're buying through a little bit of nepotism. Like that's, people think that's gone. That's not. They're buying what their friends are buying. They're doing what their friends are doing. I think the fractionalization of artwork is a trend that's going to trickle for some time, because I think people are really into that, and it's building communities around art and investment. I think NFTs are here to stay, as much as I think there was a very, very unusual moment of time that created that bubble. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more, who knows? I mean, what's exciting about this and challenging at the same time is that, as I said at the beginning, we're going to look back and go, God, what was that era? Because things were spinning out of control. And unless we design something that's going to create a fair market, an accessible market, an investable market, you're either going to your audience is going to be dead, or they're not going to be buying or engaging with you anymore. So I'm sorry, it's not a very succinct answer, because I think we don't know. And I think we're all in businesses that are tapping into the now and building something for the future that we think is how the market should be going.
I have something to add there, which I think that a lot of art is about storytelling and creating connections. And that's actually where technology comes in so like perfectly, in terms of helping more people understand the stories behind the art and more people understand why it's valuable. So yes, a generation is going to be dying that's supported in a certain way, and there are new generations of how it's happening. But also that boomer generation read books to find out which artists they found interesting, and they saw facsimiles of the paintings that they cared about. Whereas there's a new generation that's seeing things using AR filters so that they can then imagine what it looks like on their wall before purchasing it, or they're hearing all about the artist and all of the puzzles that an artist has produced in order to create a painting or an NFT. So they kind of the investment in that artist is still through storytelling and through narrative. And I think that doesn't go away, even if you talk about having fractional ownership or having all of those things. That core essence of what art is will not disappear.
And to add to that, I think because there are so many platforms to experience these artists, a lot more clients in the auction space, I think, are becoming a lot more comfortable with making bids. Like, it's not unheard of. If you asked me 10 years ago, someone placing a bid on an item that's $100,000 or $1 million, having not seen it in the physical space, I'd be like, of course not. It makes the press all the time. And Sotheby's and Christie's, they both herald it when they talk about how many clients are placing bids on products or art and objects that are just not even seen in real life. And they will exceed the $1 million price range already at that point. So I think that there is a level of comfortability. Granted, those might not be the boomers, to Charlotte's point. Like, it might be the younger consumers for sure that feel a lot more at ease with that. And also the trust that they have in the marketplaces that are selling it. I mean, that's also going to be key, that what the big auction houses are selling are indeed what it is, but the way that these auction houses demonstrate the art to a would-be buyer is what has fundamentally changed over the last 15 years, because they're not looking at the printed catalogs in the same way that they used to rely upon them way back when. I think that was probably more of a crutch for ourselves as the auction house. Be like, okay, it's here, it existed, and I can show it to a consignor. You know, that it's, it's being sold.
Maybe I'd like to add some thoughts on the seller side, because I think it's very interesting that when we follow conversations, they're mainly driven by the seller side, because that's been the way how it has been for ages. And when we think about technology, I think it's also important to realize it's not only going to be technological revolution, but also society revolution or behavioral evolution. So whatever happens will have an impact on people regardless of age, I would say. Most likely more on Gen Z and Gen Alpha, but I wouldn't exclude boomers and even, older people, because it's impacting all our lives in every slice of life. Why would anyone be open to make exceptions when it comes to art and the art market? So I think the consumer side will put a lot of pressure on the existing system of the art market and demand how things have to change, have to be more transparent, have to be, different, because this is how they buy cars and watches and vacations. And I think that'll be interesting to see how a market has to adjust to something and has to take a huge leap, because he was in a very convenient position to not do so for a very long time. So I think pressure will always also come from the consumer side and introduce a kind of consumer orientation, which is very foreign to this industry as of yet.
I want to talk about Bernadine's 93-year-old grandmother who loves to buy art in Cataway.
Yeah, no, I was just, you're completely right, Kristen. Like, the people are, it's not just the young kids, like the older generations love the technology too. And what's interesting is what others thought of as a risk factor, i.e. the authenticity of the piece that you're buying, my grandmother was like, I'm going to figure out if it's a real one. Like, that's my job. The technology can get me the work, and then I'm going to go and do some research and figure out if it really is something. So I think that the thing about authenticity online and making sure that it really is what it says it is, I think it's about honesty and trust that you're giving the information that you have at that point in time, and understanding that that is changeable. Like, attributions can change, the information we have about that artwork can change, but you know that that is true at the point of giving that information, and that you trust that digital platform that's publishing it, that is true. Yeah.
I think there's a bit of a risk, isn't there, that we talk about technology as if it's stripping away so much. You know, we keep sort of, you know, it's okay if you haven't seen it in person. Well, you know, just because you want to have a different experience of buying a piece of art or selling a piece of art, we talk about technology as like the antithesis of traditional expertise. And that's absolutely not what anybody is trying to, you know, there's incredible businesses at the moment trying to do incredible things with authenticity. You know, like there's 3 big ones that I can think of that are sort of moving into the kind of AI authenticity space. And what they're doing, you know, and by the way, I'm a real naysayer, you know, like, yeah, whatever, like you can't do that. And then, you know, the conversation, actually, wow, that's amazing. But all these things, and, you know, then there's coming up with valuations like we do. You know, we can't sit there with a machine and create a product that can also value things without having a huge amount of specialist expertise behind it. And there's this, I think particularly, I really didn't mean to bash boomers, by the way, so much in my earlier comment. I think there's a very quick reaction to technology in a very traditional space, which almost makes people recoil and have an element of mistrust. You know, they have this element of like, well, I don't want that experience, particularly with an artwork. It's such an emotional thing. I want it to be in person. I want it to be between a human and a human. And that's, you know, there's a lot more to it than that. And there's a lot more accessibility and trust that we can actually create with technology. But it is so easy for that narrative to grow, because there are people trying to create algorithms and AI into, you know, to mimic 40 years of expertise. You know, almost all the products that we work with or partners that we work with are trying to some degree to try and pick up human expertise and mimic it to become more effective.
Yeah. And transparency and accessibility is at the core of what all of us here do. What more work can be done with tech to make that happen in the art market? And maybe, Kirsten, this is something that you could explore with findings from the Art and Tech report.
Unfortunately, we didn't. Well, let me repeat your question. How to increase transparency? I don't even think we are using all the transparency which is able already, because as Bernadine mentioned earlier, there are, you know, people or segments of people who are not necessarily interested in having or providing the full transparency. So I think, again, it's down to the consumer or the collector to see how he or she is leveraging what's possible. And I think there are a lot of options already out there. And I think Web3 as a concept has had an enormous push, at least on the side of digital art, to it, that collectors became quite used to being in direct contact with artists and being able to actually get hold of all the information from the first source, which I think, you know, is the safest probably way to gain your true and secure information. And I think this direct concept to get as close to where the information is coming from is probably the concept for further technological products to be explored, how we can deliver on that demand, and how can I make sure I can find the information myself without relying on gatekeepers or maybe even products. It's about accessibility on demand to be autonomous in what I do or wanted to decide in terms of buying or collecting. And I think that will have a full range of possibilities still out there, but the concept stays the same. It's about offering different kind of ways how to create transparency for myself to be in the best position before I buy. And I think that's a good thing because it's been overdue.
Can I'll add to that. I ran a business for 10 years working with private collectors, and I saw firsthand why transparency is something worrisome for people sometimes. And it's not all money laundering or like tax evasion. I think that there are many reasons why people are private about their most valuable possessions. So I think that often kind of privacy and security are used kind of interchangeably, and sometimes also there's a focus on like needing to disclose everything, and I don't think that's necessarily where we have to go. And that's, I think, the nuance in this space that is slightly different from a lot of other places where you have you don't want everyone to know that you have a Picasso hanging at home, or that you have certain things in your possession, and that's for a lot of different reasons. And yeah, so I always think about this. There's like a balance between accessibility and privacy, and how you balance that. Technology can definitely do it, but I think that when you sometimes discussions on this subject generalize, and then when you generalize, it actually ends up sounding like it's impossible to have both. And actually the truth is that you can have trust and accessibility and a certain level of transparency while also preserving privacy and like the security of information, etc. Which, interestingly, the way that NFTs blew up kind of actually didn't help, because you've got public blockchain addresses that you can airdrop things to, and it's like the ultimate accessibility rather than helping people understand that it is that you can be nuanced in that approach.
Yeah. But it's interesting that you refer to accessibility and transparency in relation to data. I also like to think of transparency in terms of information about the whole process of buying and collecting is out there. So it's not that I have to ask for a PDF and someone decides I'm not going to send it to her because she's not, worth it or whatever. So there's no gatekeeping in what kind of information I would like to find. And at least it's been made possible to find information, not necessarily about your private data, but in terms of what's on the market, what will be coming onto the market, and and have the same chances like people used to have with explicit knowledge and being privileged. Just as an additional thought.
Would the panel also agree that I think it has a lot to do with the mindset of the younger generation? So if you consider social media and this concept of showing off, this is what I like, this is what I do, this is my life. And when I think about how NFTs blew up, it reminded me very much of that. The fact that I can see Kristen owns all of these things was just so ripe for that kind of consumer. And then for other consumers, they don't want to share, what they have. But I think at the time when digital art was coming into its own, it very much felt like this. It was just like, here's my collection, see what I have. Because it just essentially, to me, it mimicked what was going on in all of the other social media platforms. But for some collectors, that can be, as you said, Bernadine, it can be an issue. Do I want everyone to know that this NFT I purchased was $60,000? Maybe not, right? But for others, that probably was seen as almost like their trophy or their badge. But I think it's definitely going to be different for each customer.
It really depends how you sort of break down the word transparency, doesn't it? Because we're talking about, you're absolutely right. You're talking about kind of flex appeal and how important flex appeal is in the current market. And I always find art a really interesting one compared to the other kind of what I call passion assets, because everything else is kind of meant to be shown off. It's your watch, your car, your jewelry, but art is something that's personal in your home or in one of your properties. It's it's something that you don't flex about as much. So it is interesting how people have taken that. And, you see it on social media all the time. There's plenty of people that are anonymous, but they post their collections, which I always think is really interesting. Like psychology, like I've just bought this, you saw it go through auction in a public sale, and now I've got it, or I bought this on the private market and now I'm showing it off. I think, to me, transparency in this context is, it's less to do with, anyone wanting to know who's got a Picasso on their wall. And it's about allowing, people talk about the kind of democratization of the art world, which the art market, which I find really problematic. We're talking about an art market in this context that is, for high net worth individuals, absolutely fantastic. Let's go and democratize the art market, but don't come into the blue chip world and expect to democratize it, because it is a very small part of. And the fact that we can open up exhibitions and people can walk into auction houses and view artworks that have been in private collections for 20 years should be celebrated and talked about more, because people don't know they can do that. They think that these doors are only for people who, can bid in the sale. But for transparency, for me, is about giving a very opaque marketplace the opportunity to be a little bit more honest about how it trades. So, which, NFTs and the blockchain welcome with, open arms. And that's why I think it's so attractive to people. The reality of, we talk a lot about this with prints and multiples, and we look at auction data to come up with a valuation. But really what you're seeing there is only about 30% of the market when you see something go through sale in prints and multiples. If you go into the luxury area, it's an even smaller slice of the pie. You're not seeing what's happening. So as much as we don't want to share private acquisitions, and that it would never be the intention, there is a need to slightly, level the playing field for people who want to come into this marketplace, can come into this marketplace, but just don't know where to look, because you can go on a very large, well-known platform that sells art and advertises auctions, and you can upload a work and put a value on it, and it can sit on that site for 3 years at that value, and then it will make everybody in the market think that's what people are buying it for. And in reality, that's just one person doing one thing. Where if you can bring together data and unlock a little bit of that mysticism around how buying at auction works, how buying privately works, why the prices what the prices are when you walk into a high street gallery. I'm talking very much from a price point of view because, that's my business. But I think when I talk about transparency, I mean giving people the tools to be able to understand a little bit more about how it works. We all know how it works, people don't know how it works, and people don't want to ask the questions sometimes that feel foolish to ask.
It's that classic collect like an insider, which tech is helping everybody to do. And on that note, as the theme for International Women's Day is inspire inclusion, how do you see your practices and your businesses inspiring inclusion within art and tech? How does that make the art world more inclusive? Big question.
I could start, and again, I'm no longer at Sotheby's, but I would like to think that at the organizations I've been at, while that's a theme for this year, I have seen it played out actually quite well in my last 10 years at Christie's and Sotheby's. Christie's had their first auction that was dedicated to female artists online, like back in 2020. That continues to be a themed auction in both of the houses year after year. I think there's also a lot of opportunities just as a manager, people manager, that you guide folks who may not yet know what they want to do. Sometimes, and I've noticed this with more junior teammates, is that they sometimes think that they have to rely on others for their career, etc. I always say, no, you're in charge of your career. You own that. But sometimes they need a little push on that because they might not feel like they're able to do that. And I honestly, like some of the things that I've gone through over the last 10 years, I don't know that I would have done that when I was 23, 24. 25. But I think it's a great theme for this year for sure, inspiring inclusion. But I am so grateful for my time at Christie's and Sotheby's, because I always felt that gender wasn't an issue. And this is probably my own personal take on it, but just seeing all of these women at high levels in the organization, all facets of it, not just marketing communications, but all facets of it, from the business to the from the business getting. You just don't see that. But I think there are going to be some colleagues who probably need that push, particularly in the art space, which I noticed was distinctly different from working at a consumer packaged good company where everyone had MBAs. And you go into the art space and they have art history majors, et cetera. I noticed right off the bat that there was a distinct difference in the mindset of some folks about how much you can promote for yourself. And I didn't necessarily find that in the art space, but I saw that a lot in the CPG space, because that's probably how we were also brought up. I went to business school as well. So you probably had that kind of mindset.
And Bernadine, how have you seen art and tech inspire inclusion?
I think it has equalized things a little bit. So I have so many thoughts on this, but if I look at my own personal experience, I went from being a gallery manager to now, let's say 13 years later, running a business on behalf of the parent company of Art Basel. It's a big step. And I think that thanks to tech, I'm able to have a place at the table to discuss what's important and to discuss what's possible. The traditional career trajectory of going then up to specialist, then to wherever is maybe more difficult. Then in terms of within the company I'm running now, where one of our values is empowering each other's assertiveness. And it really ties into what you were saying, Kristen, about helping be the voice of others in the room that you think might not be speaking up their opinion or what they are thinking. Because sometimes it's not just about you propelling yourself, but feeling that others want to hear your opinion and want to know what you're thinking. So I think that is what inclusion is about. It's about that empathetic approach of understanding that there might be views out there that are different to your own and bring a value. And often those are from the different perspective. I'll give one other anecdote. Is one of my favorite type of events to attend is an unconference, which is it's an event that you go to and there's no set panel. Everyone who attends is considered an expert. And it's a roundtable discussion between all of the attendees. And often the most eye-opening things that happen at those conversations are when the CEO of a fast-moving consumer goods company is sitting next to someone who's a marketing executive at a different company altogether, or someone who's a bit more junior at Meta or something like that, and that they're talking to each other, and the debates that happen, because they would never actually sit in the same room a lot of the time, but then because that happens. So I do think that there's something about making sure that people feel that their opinions are heard and valuable. And to go back to the beginning, thanks to technology and the rate of innovation right now, it helps younger people feel that they can have a voice there. And interestingly, it's gone the other way around. Now we have to also empower those who maybe aren't young to feel that their voices are also still heard, right? Because there still is a lot of wisdom to be had in the older generations too. So it's a really interesting balance.
And then as for the future, what emerging trends and technologies do you think are going to have the most significant impact in years to come? Maybe Charlotte, you can touch on that.
Well, I think, I think I said it earlier, in terms of what impact I think it's going to have, we're still yet to see. I think that what we're seeing in terms of, and again, we need to split this up big time, in terms of women artists in this space. We do a lot to champion female artists. I'm always frustrated that we need to go back in time and champion the ones that are now on the secondary market that lost out on years of being promoted, and therefore their markets being promoted. If I was going to spend a lot of money at the moment, I'd spend it on Bridget Riley. I think that there's a huge amount that we can go back and we rediscover. And also I think that there's an opportunity now for them to be appreciated as artists rather than female artists, by the way. And I think that's really important. It's like, like, can we put this artist in the context of their work? And actually that's kind of almost problematic for events like these sometimes, it's like, we want to talk about tech. Like, I don't see a load of guys talking about you being men in art and tech, but it's a really tricky one to navigate. There's the emergence of AI as a medium instead of a piece of technology. That's really exciting to me. And I believe in it, very controversially, as long as we're transparent about it, back to that word. There's what we can do in the art market and how people will be buying and selling in future and showing. And I think, the ability to walk into certain areas, let's just remember when sort of like publishing became available. And suddenly you were able to see in black and white images, art collections and artworks. Like, let's just take ourselves back to before the internet. Like, you wouldn't have seen up other than in print extraordinary artworks. You'd have heard about them, but you wouldn't have seen the images. Like that wasn't that long ago. That's what I find completely and utterly amazing. Like, I always use in terms of the market, I always use the example of, it was 1970 when the first artwork sold for over $1 million. And that was, I think, a Turner painting. And then in 2021, an NFT hit 69 million. Like, we haven't got any concept of how quickly this market's moving. So what I hope for it, and the trend that I'm seeing, is that there are a lot of key players. You try putting on an event like we're doing later this year with people in art and tech. Even like 7 years ago, you wouldn't be able to pick from the most sensational, amazing, innovative companies like you can in the current market. So I don't know is the answer, Erin. I mean, I don't know whether anyone else has any predictions, but I know that it's going to not be what I predict right now. I think it's going to be something that we're yet to really understand.
Yeah, Kristen.
Okay, at least me, I guess. I think what we haven't touched upon today is that technology will also have, or already is having, a major impact on art production. So I think what we still will see more and more is the rise and the creation of completely new forms of art, starting with digital art as a genre, with generative art, and then art in combination with AI. So I don't think we are there yet, and it'll be so exciting to see what else is happening. So I think we are witnessing such an exciting moment in contemporary art history, where we were looking back at and say, this is where it all started to become new. And also not necessarily as a technology trend, but I think everything what is happening on a technology level will somehow lead to the bigger question of digital ownership. So I think it's something we all have to still fully understand, how this will impact all of us in terms of, well, we all tend to have everything, in the form of a digital twin, or will it be sufficient enough in 10 years' time to just own in the digital version because my life is being lived through Apple Vision Pro? I don't know. So I think technology will again impact on society, and that will lead to new solutions and maybe also consumer needs. And that's obviously very hard to anticipate, but I'm sure it'll be interesting times ahead.
I just say, I think one of the dangers that we have is that we lack the appreciation because we are fired with so much art every day. Just back to my point about how it used to work. Can you imagine walking into the National Gallery in 1960, 1950? Like, can you imagine the impact of walking into a gallery back then? Compared to now, where, I pick up my phone and first thing in the morning and I am hit on Instagram with image after image after image, like creativity, outcome. It's a very, very difficult now, I think, to cut through and to have, and in some ways that's made us appreciate what we love more, right? Because you have a different reaction to something that you want to buy. There's something that's got to be really quite unique rather than just fundamentally exceptionally skilled. it's a real consideration for how we engage with art and exhibitions, and particularly on the primary market. I think, primary artists have really got their work cut out for them to stand out in the current marketplace. It's really difficult to fight through the noise and the sound of what's thrown at us on a day-to-day basis, in the way that a Warhol print, which is so iconic, it's almost lodged in your brain, has that lasting impact.
I do agree. And actually, that is something where I can refer to the research we've done. So although the supply and the offer is going to be so much bigger, because artists will have easier access to creative tools, and collectors will be able to collect more easily. But we can see in data there will always be a very strong demand or desire for curation and navigation. And that is something which indicates that it's not a substitution we're talking about. It's an extension, and tools or things like curation will always have their own right to help and navigate through what's out there. So I don't think that will be vanishing, quite the opposite. So again, every time an art market player from the traditional field is, being skeptical or even feared, I think it's changing, definitely. And we all have to go on with the change, because otherwise you will be left behind. But it's not going to vanish. You just have to find your position, how to still contribute under today's terms. And I still think it will remain many of the things we all appreciate, being it art perception, art mediation, will still be essential to everything around.
If anybody does have any questions, we're heading towards the end of the panel now. So if anybody has got any questions, please do write them in the comment box below. If you've got questions for anybody in particular, or more generally about art and tech.
Kristen, I'm so glad you brought up the creating with digital technologies, because I think that the fascination with craftsmanship on, for example, painting in the 17th century Dutch painters that were just doing these amazing things with perspective. You can have that same type of appreciation for generative artists who have an ability to create prompts or use the tools in a way that you just go, wow, this is extraordinary. And I think that there's something also about understanding that helps then again, it's that storytelling. Like, if people understand how complicated it is, what people are building with technology, there'll be more appreciation for it.
And by the way, the old masters used technology. Hockney wrote a book about it. They picked up pieces of glass with optics. They were playing with optics to create perspective so that they could paint. And they would, that's technology. It's really interesting how, if you look at any we consider so many things traditional. We consider people who are very scathing about AI as a medium in art wouldn't think twice about a print or Hockney iPad drawing. No one ever saw those coming. So it's so easy to write history in a way that's different from what's happening today. And as much as we're moving very quickly, people have been, artists particularly, by the way, less so us technological people, but artists are the ones that tend to push the boundaries. And then we learn.
Yeah, I think if you see technology as just another medium, that's why, like you mentioned before about there's just so much thrown at us, but at the same time, I think human creativity probably won't ever die down as long as there's other media to express that in, even with AI. Now, hopefully that won't take over us, but I truly believe it's like, I was waiting for okay, you know what, I'm going to get tired of something because I just see too many regular humans, not artists, creating the same kind of artwork. But actually, you don't get tired of it. I'm actually quite amazed that I'm still not tired of it after 10 years of Instagram. Let's really think about all of the stuff that is thrown at us, particularly if you love art or you love to consume it, that you actually still find a love for it. And I think as long as there are good artists out there who know how to leverage the platforms that are available to them, the technologies, it's just another medium for them.
I suppose a nice note to end on would be, how can we better support the next generation of women, either looking to forge a path in art and tech or using tech to better advance their art practice?
Oh, that's a good one. Good one. I think from my perspective, we talked about management of young women in the art market, and I have to say that having been in the art market my whole career, I listen to an awful lot of my friends in different industries talk about the imbalance of men and women. It's not something I've experienced, but I also think that I'm not the sort of person that shuts up and probably has always given myself a place at the table. Not that I shouldn't have to say that, I guess, is the point. But I think for me, it comes, what I've really noticed is, since leaving auction and moving into a tech business, there's an awful lot of, as you said, Kristen, as you saw when you came into auction, there's an awful lot of young women who have studied art history. Like, if you look at the statistics, then, women tend to do the more artistic, historical subjects. This is a problem, that's already showing itself in our children. Boys tend to go after the maths and the sciences, and girls tend to go into appreciating just whatever it is. There is a trend there. And then when you have a lot of people come into an industry, you are just going to find that there are certain people that are going to stand out, and it's going to be very competitive. The tech industry is, from my experience, a much more male-dominated environment. And I think we're going to see more and more people who are wanting to bridge the gap, women, I hope, wanting to bridge the gap between the creative industries and the engineering industry, which is really in its most basic form what we're looking at. So, celebrating that. And I think also the other thing is, one of the biggest challenges when you want to build a product is almost the huge opportunity that stands in front of you. Like, where do I take this? We could do this with it. We could do this with it. Oh my God, we can actually build something and make it work. And I think ensuring that people have voices, we've done a lot, or rather, as we've built MyArtBroker, we don't have such a massive separation as other businesses do between marketing, specialism, and technology. Like, those departments work together on a daily basis, don't they? Erin, everyone's together, everyone's talking, everyone knows what everyone's doing. Whereas in slightly more traditional companies, perhaps, there's a real separation. Marketing say this has to happen. Business development over here feel like this. And the specialist department wants to do this. And to close that gap is where you can really motivate people, because they can see how what they're doing is making a difference to the other people in the business. So yeah, I'd hope to do that. I think that's the way we do it, is show them the bigger picture and bridge that gap.
We've already come to the end of our hour. So thank you so much to all of you panelists for all of your amazing insights. And thank you to everyone for joining. I'm sure if anybody does have any questions that they'd like to ask any of the panelists, you can reach out via LinkedIn or send us an email at MyArtBroker. I'm sure everybody would love to answer those questions.
Great. Thanks, Erin. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.